Alan Levinson. I'm the director of the Oklahoma University Schusterman Center for Judaic and Israel Studies. We're one of 3 Schusterman centers in the country, along with Brandeis and UT Austin, and we're about to enter in 2020 our 25th year of Jewish studies here at the university. I have some quick thank yous, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague Rona Seidelman, who's going to introduce the speaker today. First of all, I want to thank Simona Di Nepi for coming to us all the way from Boston. I want to wish everybody a happy Jewish New Year's, happy, healthy, sweet New Year. I want to make sure that you all know the students, glad to see a nice number of students here. I want you to know that all of our events at the Schusterman Center, whether it's academic lectures or cultural performances, music, art, they're always free, they're always open to the public, and the only prerequisite for any of our events is interest. If you're interested, you're invited. And I want to also just thank, in addition to the students, our colleagues who've come today to hear what I'm sure is going to be a very fascinating talk. And I would like, without further ado, to introduce my good colleague, Dr. Rona Seidelman.
It's my great pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Ms. Simona Di Nepi. Simona is the Charles and Lynn Schusterman Curator of Judaica at the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston. Prior to moving to Boston, she held curatorial positions at the Royal Academy of Arts, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the National Gallery, all in London, and Beit Tfutzot, the Museum of the Jewish People in Tel Aviv. Originally from Rome, Ms. Di Nepi has a BA in History and Cinema from Tel Aviv University, and an MA in History of Art from the Courtauld Institute in London. Simona has numerous publications in the field of art history. Several of these publications are exhibition catalogs for Renaissance portraits, Renaissance Siena, and Velázquez. These are exhibitions that were held in the National Gallery, London. And in addition, she's the author of From Duccio to Leonardo, Renaissance painting from 1250 to 1500, which was published by Yale University Press. We're delighted that she agreed to come and speak with us here today about the collection that she oversees at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. On a personal note, I'd like to add that Simona has been one of my dearest friends for over 20 years. And I think it's pretty safe to say that when we were students together at the Hebrew University, we never would have imagined that one day we'd be celebrating Rosh Hashanah together in Norman, Oklahoma. And that never in our wildest dreams would we have thought that I would be the Schusterman Chair of Israel Studies, introducing the talk that she's giving as the Schusterman Curator of Judaica. Right? So this just goes to show you how wonderfully surprising life can be. So please join me in welcoming Simona.
Thank you so much, Rona. You will hate me for saying this, but it's not 20, it's 25. Right, okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so happy to see that so many of you have come tonight. I am Simona Di Nepi, Charles and Lynn Schusterman Curator of Judaica at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. Thank you so much to the Schusterman Center for inviting me, in particular to Alan and Rona and Trice for the invitation and putting everything together for me. And this evening, really, I'm going to speak to you about our Judaica collection at the Museum of Fine Arts, how we display it, how we integrate it in our encyclopedic galleries. And this is sort of a collage that I've done that includes a number of works from the Charles and Lynn Schusterman collection of Judaica. It's a gift that came to us 6 years ago, comprising of over 120 objects in different media, in different regions, and different periods, so very eclectic. Before actually showing you my favorites, the highlights, and how we show them in the galleries, in our galleries, I wanted to see, by show of hands, like a stand-up comedian, I guess, how many of you in the context of museum knows what we mean by Judaica? So not in the university, but in the context of museums. Okay, I'll explain that. So I'll explain by showing you a snapshot of our brand new website page that we've created especially for Judaica, where we explain to the wide audience what Judaica is. And as you can see from the beginning, we say that in general, the strict and precise definition of Judaica is objects that are used in rituals, both at home and in the synagogue. Jewish rituals, of course. But we tend to expand that to what is usually known as Judaica, so books and manuscripts that are used also for Jewish practice. Now, when I arrived at the MFA about a year and a half ago, I thought that really also to reflect the content of the Schusterman gift, we should think about, more broadly about Judaica. So they could be paintings, sculpture, ancient coins, postcards, anything that expresses Jewish life, history, and culture, really. So that's what we've been doing at the Museum of Fine Arts, and you will see different kind of material. So the Schusterman gift includes 120 objects, mainly ceremonial objects, and the record in terms of number goes to Hanukkah lamps. Now, Hanukkah lamps are used during the upcoming imminent festival of Hanukkah, and where every night for 8 nights consecutively light 8 candles to remember the inauguration of the temple in Jerusalem and the rededication of the temple of Jerusalem after the victory of the Maccabees over the Seleucid kingdom. So this is just a little reminder to us all. And the collection has over 33 Hanukkah lamps, as you can see, from different materials, in different materials, different origin, different periods, in ceramics, in silver, in bronze, in brass, and so on. The second group of objects in number in the Schusterman gift are Havdalah spice containers. So these are used at sunset on Sunday at the end of the Shabbat to mark the beginning of the regular week. And they are passed around, they contain spices, as their name suggests, and they're passed around so to smell the sweet spices in a way to sweeten our transition to the regular week, back to work on Monday. Not Monday, Sunday, but that's the idea. And we have 22. You can see in this slide, they come in all sorts of sizes and shapes. We have trains, we have flowers. Perhaps the most common is towers, a bit like European towers in all the cities that you see in the middle. We also have 7 beautiful Italian birth amulets. These in particular are from the 18th and 19th century. So in Italy, where I come from, there was this custom to protect newborn babies and mothers to hang the amulet, usually made of silver, over the baby's crib. And inside the amulet case was the actual amulet inscribed with prayers to protect the baby. So we have 7. So I'm just giving you a sense in broad terms of the content of the collection, and then I'd like to show you some individual highlights. In addition to these work made of metals that you've seen so far, we also have 7 textiles, and this is only from the Schusterman gift. 7 textiles, 5 works on paper, 4 paintings, 3 sculptures, and numerous pieces of ceramics. So this gives you an idea of the content of the collection. Now, I'll start a little bit with this sort of strange title, because even before the Schusterman gift was donated to us 6 years ago, in 2013, there was some Judaica in the collection, very little, just 15 pieces. But I call it unintentional because no one set out to purchase or accept a donation as Judaica. They weren't seen, interpreted as pieces of Jewish history. But we had 15 objects before 2013. And in chronological order, we received a gift in 1916, over a century ago, of a Polish shofar that is used at this time of year, a ram's horn used during the high holidays in synagogue. We received 17th century, also about 1917, a 17th century Dutch, actually it's a Bible. This is interesting, and I found out about the previous ownership of this by chance. So in museums there is something which is fascinating called provenance. Provenance is the history of the whereabouts of an object, and it is a branch by itself. You know, there are PhDs and books only about provenance. It's usually associated mainly to provenance that has to do with Holocaust or with antiquities and looted art. But I realized that we had this Torah wrapper. It's made of linen and it's embroidered. It is German, 1742, and it was made to celebrate the birth of a baby boy. And I noticed that it said Philip Lehman of the Lehman Brothers. So it turns out that in 1938, Philip Lehman, after his wife's death, decided to donate a huge part of his collection to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. And the Met decided to turn down 300 textiles that were the private collection of Philip's wife. So luckily for us, for the MFA, Philip Lehman came to us and he gave us a huge range and variety of textiles. And one of them is this exquisite and very important and very early Torah wrapper, embroidered by hand, and it's a piece of history, really. So I'll carry on because I know that I'm here really to talk about the Schusterman collection. Then the museum purchased ancient Judean coins, ancient Jewish coins, again, not as Judaica, but just as ancient coins. Here we have symbols, old symbols of the land of Israel, like the pomegranates. And these coins were struck during the period of the first and second revolt in the land of Israel, in both cases against the Romans, around 70 AD and 132 to 36 AD. Then a private collector of American folk art in 1960 gave us this wooden gilt, you cannot see here, but it's gold, lion. It's one of a pair of 2 lions that used to sit on top of a Torah ark in a historic Boston synagogue in the South End. Unfortunately, that synagogue is no longer, but we have the lion, and we're actually looking for the second one. So these, again, I'm just telling you all pieces that were there, but no one really knew they were there. They sat in different departments, they're not on display. I should say that the lion will go on display next April in a special exhibition about American folk art. Then in 1960, a Jewish wedding ring came. It was believed that it was a Renaissance Italian Jewish ring with a little house on top that is believed to represent the temple, the ancient temple of Jerusalem. Chagall painting, a village street. So we had different works that came in the 150 years of the history of the museum, but without really any deliberate plan to collect Judaica. So the first piece of deliberate Judaica that came in the collection was 10 years ago, when my colleague, Tom Hickey, the curator of European decorative arts, decided that we needed one major important piece of European silver Judaica. And so he proceeded to acquire this splendid Hanukkah lamp made in Augsburg, Germany in the middle of the 18th century. We put it on, well, I didn't, but it was put on display in this marvelous gallery of European art. And I think that at that point the MFA sort of ticked, said, okay, done, we've purchased Judaica, we have one major piece and it's on display. They had no idea what was to come a few years later. In fact, only 4 months later, this was acquired in December 2009. I think in the spring 2010, the MFA heard that a lady that no one knew by the name of Jessica Phillips, a retired teacher from Kansas City, left the bulk of her estate to the MFA for the study, acquisition, and display of Judaica. Now, no one knew this lady. It came as a total surprise. We couldn't even ask her. Why to the MFA, and why for Judaica in particular? It's really moving to think of this. And my colleague, Marietta Gambareri, Jessica Phillips, curator of Judaica, went to dig in the archive of Temple Israel, that is 10 minutes walk from the MFA, and found 2 documents that are very telling. On the left, you have the conversion certificate of Jessica Phillips, and the following day, you have the marriage certificate of Jessica Phillips at Temple Israel. She had met a Jewish doctor in Boston. She was working as a medical technologist, so she had a Jewish marriage, and she became close to the MFA, and I guess that she always felt that what was missing at the MFA was a collection of Jewish art. So this is before the Schusterman gift arrived 6 years ago. And at that point I should say that this marvelous Hanukkah lamp was and still is on display in the gallery, but it was pretty much the only piece. Maybe there were 1 or 2 more, but we have Judaica on display in 10 different galleries in the museum. The collection is very diverse, as I said, and eclectic, and what the museum has decided to do is not to create a separate Judaica gallery, but rather to integrate the collection with the rest of the encyclopedic collection of the MFA. That is to say, to place the pieces according to the time and place when they were produced. And again, back to the same gallery, if we have the European candlesticks from Germany, it will be in this gallery. And I will show you a number of galleries to give you a sense of how this works. And I will start, so what I'll do is I'll show you some highlights, some favorites, and where they are displayed at the MFA. This is by far one of the most important pieces in the Schusterman gift. It's an absolutely spectacular pair of Shabbat candlesticks. It is very remarkable and unusual, first of all, because of the size. When you see them, I'm sorry you can't see them here, how large they are. They are much larger than Shabbat candlesticks normally are. And also they have this very bold shape, sort of the stems. You see that if you look at them, they seem to recall the twisted columns of the Temple of Jerusalem. Around the rim, you see on the right-hand side, there is a Hebrew inscription that says, Lord of the Universe, here I've come to light the candles of the Shabbat. So this, in a way, says it is a piece of Judaica, but we will see that we can't really be sure how it began, how these candlesticks began their life. And when you see them up close, you notice that there's this striking and very deep relief, very bold, it's called repoussé work. It's basically pushing the silver from the reverse. And with beautiful fruit and flowers, and looking for the Jewishness of the candlesticks, because one might say, well, they were born as regular candlesticks, and then the Hebrew inscription was added later, which, by the way, wouldn't take away, to my eyes, from the value, from the historical and significance value of these pieces. But you might think that, but then again, some of the fruits in the iconography, in the imagery of the candlesticks, seem to allude to the 7 species of the land of Israel. I don't know if you can see them, but there are some grapes, there is wheat, there are figs, but then again there are mushrooms and strawberries, which... So I like to wonder about how these candlesticks began their life. And they might have started as Judaic objects, we're not 100% sure. And I like to call these objects wandering objects, and I'm referring to the wandering function. The fact that they wander, that their use changed over time. Now, you see them here, actually in that same gallery that I showed you of European decorative arts, with this very fuzzy, I'm sorry about the slide, photograph. And they are shown on the left, just behind another piece of what might be wandering Judaica. I don't know. So, it's this very elegant wine cup, Kiddush cup, we say. We know that it was made in Paris in 1722 because the silver marks tell us so. On pieces of silver, we date objects by the maker's mark, by the assay mark, by marks that tell us when and where they were made. So Paris 1722. But you see that on the left, there is an engraving of the Rothschild coat of arms, and on the right-hand side there is a Hebrew engraved inscription that says, "Remember the holy Shabbat to Shlomo Salomon Ansen from his rabbi on the 10th of Shvat, 5576, which corresponds to 16th of February 1816. Now, we know that the mark is 1722, and yet this rabbi decided to give it to the Rothschild boy a century later in Frankfurt. So I went to dig a little bit in the story of Ansen, Shlomo Ansen Rothschild, and I realized that it belonged to the Frankfurt branch of the famous Jewish banking family. You know, they had banks all over Europe. So he was in Frankfurt. And I looked at his birth date, and I realized that that date would have been his 13th birthday. So that means that that cup we know now was a gift for his bar mitzvah. Another thing that I realized is that he married this lady on the right, Charlotte Salomon. It was, Rothschild. It was his cousin from London. She was a painter. She was a gifted painter. Actually, she painted the work on the left where she's seen with her husband, the little boy of the bar mitzvah. Because she was a woman, of course, her sort of place in the family was overshadowed by the men in the same family, but the taste and passion for art, she passed it on to her son, to the son of the boy of the cup, because I don't know if you've heard, but in England, one of the most important palaces, historic houses, is Watson Manor. It is the Rothschild private art collection. It is stunning, the setting and the art collection. So their son, the son of this little boy, went on to build Watson Manor. So this may be a wandering object. We don't know how it was born, but the history, the story that it tells, it just keeps on giving. And when I have more time, I hope to find more things about it. So in the same gallery, and I'm sorry for the awkward slide, but actually you can see well, and this was when I first joined the museum, a friend was just being silly. But this is the display that I think is the most successful in terms of integration approach, meaning we're not putting Judaica in a separate gallery, we're integrating with the rest of the collection. This particular display is successful because it really shows how two pieces of Judaica, two plates that I'll show you in a moment for Passover and the Festival of Sukkot, are integrated very effectively with the rest of Dutch 18th century ceramics made in Delft. If you've heard the term Delftware, it means ceramics made in Delft, in the city, the Dutch city of Delft, made to look like Chinese porcelain. Because Chinese porcelain was very expensive, and so the Europeans tried to imitate it. And in Jewish households as well, you would find Delftware. And this plate, which is from the middle of the 18th century in the Netherlands, that Jewish family must have said, we want something that looks like Chinese ceramics, with that candid white sort of backdrop and the blue design and the floral design and the birds. But why is this plate fascinating? Is there anything that you notice that stands out? Yes.
Aren't the letter forms relatively contemporary?
The letter forms are contemporary? That's interesting. I thought that they look like they've been, because contemporary is usually trying to rework or be different from the traditional, which at that time was not done. Here, if you see that the dot is on the tab, it shouldn't be there. So that, and also the sort of unusual shape of the back, the second letter, indicates to me that this was done by a non-Jewish painter, which was almost always the case in Europe at the time. Again, forgive my presence in the slide. This is the same gallery, and there is a whole lovely display that my colleague Marietta Gambarelli put together with 8 different objects of Judaica, all except for the Hanukkah lamp that I've talked to you about from the Schusterman gift. And these are objects of Judaica made to be used at home, only for rituals at home. And I chose one. They're all beautiful, but I chose one to show you. You can see that it's a Havdalah spice container. Again, it would contain, if you open a little door on the bottom tier, you can put cinnamon sticks and other spices to then pass around on Shabbat at sunset. And this particular example is shaped like a tower, again, either looking at Christian reliquaries or looking at the surrounding architecture in European cities. It's probably from Poland, from the beginning of the 19th century, and what is also very charming, and you can find on hanging Shabbat lamps, are these little figures here. The resolution is not good enough, but they're actually holding themselves Judaica objects. One is holding a shofar, another one is holding, Torah finials and a prayer book, and it is part of that same display of historic Judaica. And then, as you leave that gallery, that grand gallery of European 18th century decorative arts, we move into the painting corridor of 19th century European painting. And recently, well, a year ago now, we have installed these 2 paintings, these beautiful works from the Schusterman gift. Some are my absolute favorites. In fact, I think that Hannah is maybe my favorite work in the entire collection. It was painted by the Hungarian artist, I don't know what's going on with what I wrote on the top, but it was painted by Isidor Kaufmann, who was a Hungarian painter working and living in Vienna in the second half of the 20th century, of the 19th century, and it is a very compelling work. Anyone who just walks in the corridors is struck by the presence and the almost defiant gaze of Hannah. We don't know who she was. She's also been called the Jewish bride because she's wearing this headdress that she's dressed sort of for festive occasion. She's clearly an Orthodox woman, married because her head is covered. And on the top left, we see that it says Hannah, probably her name, with a crown on top. The crown usually represents the Torah, the Bible, and Isidor Kaufmann is a very interesting figure because he started out as a very successful portraitist in Vienna. His clientele was made by wealthy Jewish and non-Jewish sort of bourgeois clients in Vienna. And if you Google him, he had this gift of really capturing sort of the character of the sitter. And then, maybe in his 40s, he traveled to Hungary and started to paint traditional lives of scenes of Jewish life, like this scene. We don't know how it happened, but it happened to this painter as well, Edouard Brandon. This is a painting that is, you probably can't see it. The frame is very big, but the actual painting is absolutely minute. It's smaller than a postcard. You can actually see it better on a slide than in person. Edouard Brandon was a Jewish Parisian painter. He had displayed in the first Impressionist exhibition. He had lived in Rome, where he had painted churches and country life scenes. So I'm saying all this to say that he was not at all interested in painting Jewish life. And then, similarly to Isidor Kaufmann, something happened in his 40s, and he started to paint scenes like this with a scholar or a rabbi studying scripture, the Torah, with the Talmud, probably until late at night, because we see that he has a candle. And he even included on the top left the Hebrew inscription, Adonai Echad, God is one, part of the Shema prayer recited every morning and every evening. So there was something interesting that was happening at this time with Jewish painters in Europe who were secular, were assimilated, were urbanized, cosmopolitan. Something changed in their middle age, and they really sort of went back to their roots, and they wanted to celebrate and represent that world. This is the general information area of the Museum of Fine Arts. This is exactly last year. You can see that there's a Christmas tree, so it was around Hanukkah. And I decided to put together a little display. You see it on the wall on the right-hand side about the story of the Maccabees, the heroes of Hanukkah. And so I used a number of items from the Schusterman gift because like this lovely, small, almost miniature-like watercolor, they tell the story of the Maccabees from the book of Maccabees. That, by the way, it's very interesting. The book of Maccabees is part of the Catholic Bible, but it was shunned by rabbis and is not part of the Hebrew Bible. And that in itself, for me, should be, and it is the subject of publications and symposia, and why that is. So at the beginning of the 20th century, there was a group of artists in Jerusalem that founded a school that still exists to this day, and it's the premier art school in Jerusalem, in Israel, called Bezalel School of Arts and Crafts. And these artists were very political in their intent. They believed that Jews should return to the historic land of Israel. So the work that they produced, like the small watercolor, reflected that. And in this scene, we see the family of the Hashmoneans, the Maccabees, that are standing before the soldiers of King Antiochus IV. He was a king from Syria with Greek culture and religion, who had enforced paganism in Jerusalem. He had turned the Temple of Israel essentially in a place of pagan worship. So there is a scene of confrontation between the Maccabees, who are refusing to offer a sacrifice to a statue of Zeus. And there is an inscription below that says, whereas others may have followed you, your order, we will not stray away from the covenant of our God and from our fathers. And what is interesting in this work, how even not just the main scene, the main narrative, but even the decorations is used in a political way. Because along the border, you can see, I hope, there are reproduction of coins. Those are those same Judean ancient Jewish coins that I showed you that we have in the collection that were struck during the Jewish revolts, in ancient times, that represent symbols from the land of Israel, like the grapes, the temple facade, the pomegranates, the vine leaf. So in this case, Ze'ev Rabban, who was a designer, painter, and sculptor, who created a series of 12 watercolors on the story of the Maccabees, used this story to sort of foster national pride at the time. And also from the school of Bezalel, that we actually installed and is still on display in one of the entrances of the museum. We have a beautiful Hanukkah lamp by a Yemenite artist who was only 12 years old when he arrived in Jerusalem. And again, aside from the fact that it's beautiful and shiny and silver with colored stones, what interests me is the iconography, the imagery, and what it means, and the inscription. I should say that in the centuries that Hanukkah lamps were made, usually you had symbols like the candelabra or lions. You never had narrative scenes of the Book of Maccabees, precisely because of what I said earlier, that rabbis didn't like them. They were too extreme. They were seen as fanatics. The Bezalel School of Art, that was working in the context of Zionism in the early 20th century, are the first ones who decide to show scenes from the Book of Maccabees and even inscription from the book in their Hanukkah lamp. So here you see a scene of the purification of the temple after it was recaptured from the sort of the Greek, Syrian soldiers, with an inscription that says, from Maccabees, they purified the courtyard and all that was in it, and they renewed the holy vessels. So this group of works is a fascinating one, even I think for people who are not particularly interested in the history of style, but politics and history, these objects tell us a lot. This will be the start of our upcoming Hanukkah bash in about, a few weeks. No, in a couple of months at the MFA that we do every year. It is a Hanukkah lamp from Algeria, and we've recently installed it in the brand new galleries devoted to Islamic art. So this is to show you what we do with our Jewish works. This is a piece of Islamic Jewish art because it incorporates Islamic motifs and decoration, like this double arcade of beautiful arches and palmettes, and as you can see, the crescent and moon at the top. But it was made by Jewish artists for Jewish use. By the way, it's interesting to think about the crescent and moon, because today we find it on 13 or so flags, national flags. At that time, or well, for centuries before, it was a symbol of the Ottoman Empire. But by the time that this Hanukkah lamp in Algeria was made, in the early 20th century, Algeria was no longer part of the Ottoman Empire. So one has to ask, what is it doing there? Is it a sign of allegiance to the Ottoman Empire there is no longer? Now the French are the ruling sort of regime in the area. I think that it's just part of the artistic language. It's just a decoration. It's become, you know, like the little naked putti in Italian art. It's something that was part of the language. So this will be there will be a special spotlight talk for the Hanukkah event this year at the museum. This is another favorite of mine that I like to call the most global or cosmopolitan object in the MFA collection. Why do I say that? Because it has an Arabic inscription in the center that dates it to 1268. In Islamic calendar, that's 1850-51. And it has Hebrew inscriptions that say, drink your wine in good spirit or good heart. And on the other one, you see on the top, good health and life. But it was made actually in China. It was Chinese export ceramics for a family from Baghdad living in India. So we have India, Baghdad, Jewish culture, Islam, Hebrew, Arabic. We have everything rolled into a cup and saucer. And this, by the way, you will see more and more when you go to a large museum, is the direction that museums are taking. They want to blur the boundaries. And this object, to me, is like the poster child of that sort of global language that museums want to have to appeal to everyone. And so in terms of why this ceramic set was made, the very wealthy and famous family from Baghdad, the Sassoon family, they're known as the Rothschild of the East, probably commissioned this for a wedding in the family. We're not entirely sure, even though recently it occurred to me that this verse from Ecclesiastes, drink your wine in good spirit, from Kohelet, is actually read Kohelet during the festival of Sukkot that is coming up. So I wonder if it was used under a very fancy sukkah. I don't know, it's just an hypothesis. There is also a plate that is part of the same set, but it is slightly different, and it may actually belong to the Sassoon set in London. In any case, this object sits as of 4 months ago in the corridor of Chinese ceramics. People love it, are very surprised to find it. I caught some visitors taking pictures, and it's certainly one of my favorite objects. I'm moving into modern and contemporary times because so far we've seen historic Judaica. And then this man, Ludwig Wolpert, a German Jewish designer from Frankfurt, comes along and he completely changes the face of Judaica. You can see it yourself. These pair of Shabbat candlesticks look like, I don't know, New York's skyscrapers. They're so elongated and stylized. And in fact, they're so stylized, he did them in 1960, that when, during my job interview, I was taken around the galleries and just, without any previous sort of warning, said, oh, talk about that object. Obviously, there is a Hebrew inscription, but it is so stylized and distorted that it takes a moment to see what is going on. And that was part of his style.
he always incorporated Hebrew calligraphy, but always made it different and very elongated and stretched out. As I said, this was made in 1960 in New York, so it's a very modernist piece. And the inscription that is from Isaiah say, "I will rejoice with my Lord, my soul rejoice with my God." Fortunately, I managed to understand what that was. It is installed together with brilliant and original work of jewelers and designers in post-war New York. And we're moving, I'm now taking you to sort of contemporary world because we're very committed to acquiring contemporary Judaica. It speaks to our visitors, people are interested in it, it's very striking. This man, Zelig Sigal, was a student of Ludwig Borpert in Jerusalem. He was born in 1933, sadly died a few years ago. And he devoted his life in Jerusalem to producing ceremonial objects, but in a completely contemporary fashion and look. This is, can you guess what this is? Huh? It's a spice box, and you probably know that because of the perforations, the holes. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's a small object, but it looks like a piece of contemporary sculpture. You know, it's essentially just a piece of folded silver sheet that is hammered out in the center so as to make space for this sphere with a rough texture, and the rough texture is reflected on the walls of the silver sheet. It's absolutely beautiful. And the same man made a Yahrzeit candle. So Yahrzeit is the 1-year anniversary of the death of a dear one, and it's a custom to light a 24-hour candle at home. And this is a candlestick for the Yahrzeit candle. And it beautifully alludes to the custom of tearing one's shirt in sign of mourning, because the artist actually tore the silver. It's sort of a slit piece of silver where you make the candle sit, and you can just imagine the reflection of the flame on the silver. This is to show you where these objects live. Last year, almost 10 months ago, we installed a whole case of contemporary Judaica. We're very proud that it's there. Here it is, with works from men, women, American, Israeli, Jewish, non-Jewish, all working with this very modern, sleek style that is devoid of ornamentation and very smooth and clean. So I've brought you actually to the sort of contemporary form of Judaica, and we're almost, I should finish, I think. I'll just show you that people like Judaica on social media, and that it's very popular, successful. We get a lot of likes. The objects that are, this is Trivia Tuesday, and it gets hundreds of responses and reactions. This is one of the objects that I've shown you. So it's important for us to be present on social media as well, because many people don't come to the museum. And I know that time is running out, so I'll just end by saying that I invite you to come to visit at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, hopefully for our upcoming Hanukkah grand celebration in about 2 months and a half. And please come visit. Thank you very much for being here. If you have any questions at all about the collection, I'm here. Thank you.
Why did the Schustermans decide to donate their collection to Boston? Why not New York or Chicago?
Shall I speak or?
I'm going to answer that question. I'm Lynn Schusterman. But you didn't show the finials.
I didn't show the finials.
No.
No, I didn't. I wasn't sure if,
Okay.
yeah.
It's kind of one of those things that timing is everything. I was walking through the museum with a woman who's very involved in the museum, Joyce Lindy, who has the whole wing, the Lindy wing. And I ran into Marietta, who was the European artist, and I also ran into two other curators. That one was in ceramics, and the other was contemporary. And both of them had just been to Israel and were really interested in learning about Judaica. And then the woman who had donated the money and had converted really kind of, because I'm a huge believer in conversion and accepting people and being open. And I thought how interesting this would be to have this collection in Boston. And they did a couple of things that were not done normally at that time in museums. As she said today, it's throughout the museum. In other words, I didn't want a wing of Judaica that some people would decide to go to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts and not go look at Judaica. That we were here, the Jews were here, we were part of a community, we were part of life in America, and we came from all over the world, but we became Americans, and America was our home, our country, and we were involved, and I really liked that idea that they had done that. And then secondly, there are a number of schools, both Jewish and non-Jewish, around the Boston area, plus very prominent universities. And this was going to be online so people could study the objects, and even more so today to have conversations. And then, forgive me, there was kind of just, and I shouldn't say this, but I will because I'm a very honest person. I thought how great the Cabots and the Lowells will turn over in their grave that at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts there was Judaica. Because at the time that they established all this, and I'm sure they were wonderful people, there was huge anti-Semitism. So I thought how great that this collection would be there. And to Simona's credit, and the way she's done this and explained it into Marietta, the Metropolitan Museum of Fine Arts in New York came last week to look at what the Boston Museum of Fine Arts is doing.
That's great.
So I got that in.
I know that Lynn doesn't like to be put on the spot, but I'd like to thank Lynn for the wonderful gift and really for having made possible my position as well, which it means that I want to say two things. Thanks to the Schusterman Foundation, two things. We are the non-Jewish encyclopedic collection with the largest collection of Judaica, and also my position is the first full-time Judaica curatorship in an encyclopedic museum in this country. So it's very significant. But they're following us because they are, but that's another chapter. So thank you.